Hello and welcome to the Life Biohacker Podcast. In this podcast, you will learn effective, actionable insights you can use to improve your health, happiness, and success so you can get more out of life. Hi, I'm Ryan Kimball, a certified health and life coach, and this week we're going to dive deep into water. Our first guest is Taylor Wageman, the sales manager at Pure and Secure Water Company. Taylor is an expert in pure water and the distillation of water to create the most pure water in the world. We're also accompanied by Glenn Meder, who is the son of the owner and creator of the My Pure Water distillation system, and he is here as well to share his expertise and knowledge on how and why pure water is so important to everyone and how you can easily access it and use it to create a healthier lifestyle for you and those you care about. Stay with us to the end of this episode to get a special discount code that you can start using today for My Pure Water products. Okay, great. So here we are today. We are going to be talking about distilled water. We're going to get right into some questions here and go over basically what is distilled water and how it actually parallels what occurs in nature, which is called the hydrologic cycle. So can you guys speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So that is a common question we get is distillation natural? Is it not natural? And so we kind of talk about the hydrologic cycle, which ties into what our water distillers do. So distilled water is water that has been purified and produced through heating, evaporation, and condensation. So this actually mirrors Earth's natural hydrologic cycle. So this is actually how we get rainwater. And because of this, distillation is a very natural process. And we can kind of go into what distillation is and how it's done with our water distillers if you'd like. I know sometimes it can kind of confuse people because they'll compare it to a water filtration system.
Yeah, and I think the key thing to understand about distillation is that water has a built-in purification process. And most people don't think about it this way, but this is how water purifies itself by changing phase. So water in the ocean is liquid and it's highly contaminated, right? So if you change the phase of that, which the water evaporates, well, as soon as it evaporates, it lets go of everything that it's holding on to, because we talk about water as being H2O, but water is actually not H2O in liquid form. So in liquid form, it's actually a long string of molecules, but when it evaporates, it actually turns into H2O. And so it's just H2O. So it's actually pure on the molecular level, is it lets go of everything and just becomes H2O. Then it evaporates, rises, and it condenses into clouds. And then the clouds move inland, and then the clouds cool down, and there's a pressure differential, and then it condenses and precipitates into rain. And so it's that process of, and that is water's built-in purification process. So it's that process of changing phase from liquid to vapor, and then back to liquid.
Yes.
And so all of the fresh water on the planet came from the ocean, which is very contaminated water, but pure water, but rain is very pure water, and it falls to the ground. And you've heard of acid rain. Now, what acid rain is when the rain is falling and there's air pollution. So there's smoke and smog and all that stuff. And so that water, that pure water, picks up those contaminants on the way down. But if there's no air pollution, rain falls to the ground and it's very pure. And then it hits the ground, and then it goes through the land, and it might filter underground, and it goes through the creeks, and it touches all kinds of things, and it starts picking up things again. And so it goes, and then it gets more and more contaminated, and it goes back to the ocean, and that whole cycle starts over again. But the point is that rain is extremely pure water, And that is basically what distillation is. We just basically take water, evaporate it, and the contaminants get left behind. We take that water, that vapor, and we separate it and then cool it back down into liquid water.
Wow, incredible. I've actually never heard it explained quite that way, and it actually makes a lot of sense, as on a molecular level, you're getting exactly what water is supposed to be, not all the additionals. Exactly. And I actually had that question about, rain. I've heard of polluted rain and acid rain and all these sort of things. So it's actually the contaminants it picks up in the air that cause the pollution.
On the way down.
Okay, cool.
That's why if you have a rain barrel or something like that, it's not necessarily the best thing, because, so if you have, let's say, a thunderstorm and a rainstorm, the first 5 minutes of that storm will be where all the stuff that cleans out of the air. But then if you can collect it after the first 5 minutes or so, then you're getting really pure water at that point.
Wow. Nice. Makes sense. Okay, that's perfect, actually. That's a great explanation. I'm going to remember that to use. Okay, great. So now I'd like to go into a little bit of how the other filtration systems for water work, because a lot of people use different water filters because it's known that water is polluted, but there's all this information about, well, it takes out some, or it takes some things you don't want in it and leaves some things. Can you clarify that and how it relates to distillation filtration?
Yeah, absolutely. So whenever we compare distillation to filtration systems, we're also including RO filters as well, because it is essentially a series of filters. So when you are filtering your water, you have your barrier method, or a membrane that is trying to hold back the contaminants from getting over into the drinking water side. So as we know, filters break down over time, so the quality of your water is going to decline as well. Same thing with RO systems, even though, yes, they might remove a broader range of contaminants than just a Brita filter, they still are not able to remove as many contaminants as distillation will, because distillation is going through that phase change. And that phase change is always going to be consistent. So when you first get your RO system, they're really expensive, but you might start off with 99% pure water, but then a few weeks from now, it could be dropping down to 97. Those are just examples or numbers that I'm throwing out there. But over time, you're going to get less and less pure water. With a distillation system, you're always going to get that consistent pure water.
Okay, yeah, makes sense. It doesn't break down because it's always a phase change, which is a molecular level filtration, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So distillation, you're removing the water from the contaminants, as opposed to filters and reverse osmosis are trying to remove those things from the water. And the result that you get from those filters is, let's say carbon filter, for example. Carbon filter is very effective on a very small portion of the contaminants that are in the water. And it's basically that very small portion of the contaminants do affect, those are the ones that affect the taste of the water and the smell of the water. So carbon filters are about the aesthetics of the water primarily. I mean, there are some other things that are within that small band that can be dangerous too, that carbon filters can take out. But it's a very small sliver that they take out. Plus, it's a variable result. How is it doing today versus yesterday versus the day before? You just don't know. Reverse osmosis is the same thing. You don't know what you're getting out of it, is really what it comes down to. It could be effective against this contaminant, but not that contaminant. And it could be effective today, but not tomorrow. And you just don't know what you're getting out of it. And this thing where you mentioned, well, we take out the good stuff or we take out the bad stuff and leave in the good stuff. That is purely a marketing statement from a filter company. That they can't take everything out, so they say, "Oh yeah, well we take out the bad stuff and then leave the good stuff in there." And It's pure marketing. There's obviously nothing in there that is selectively taking out this contaminant and leaving in that contaminant. And I would say with one thing that we learn with water is everywhere you go, and I'm talking like if I go 5 miles away from me, and if I go 5 miles in every direction, the water quality is totally different. I mean, it's really remarkable how different the water quality is everywhere you go. That's why it's hard to create these companies that want to create a mass solution. All they can come up with really is a carbon filter, because all they can do is take out the, fine tune the taste, but they can't really do something that takes care of everything, because it's a very complicated thing trying to take those things out if you're doing it that way. If you're doing distillation, it's just very simple. We just basically, it is extremely effective against the full range of contaminants.
Right. Okay, makes sense.
And one thing too is we don't really talk about biological contaminants in the water because, we're in the US, it's a first world country, so we may not think that we have issues like that. But if you actually Google boil alerts in the United States, you will get tons and tons of news articles from towns, from cities about people having to boil their water because there's bacteria or parasites or something that, can cause people to have issues, with, their digestive system. So they have to boil their water. You have to still do that when you have a filtration system. You still have to boil the water. But for those who have a water distillation machine, you're boiling the water, you're killing that biological contaminant in the water. And then because the pure steam is separating from that contaminant, it's going to leave behind the dead matter in the boiling tank. So people are safe. They don't have to worry about boiling their water because it's already doing it in the first step.
Nice. Okay. Yeah. I didn't even...
Yeah. A couple points on that also is, so blue-green algae in Lake Erie and everywhere else, actually. So if you boil the water, because they say boil the water, that's another thing if they have a boil alert, right? So boiling the water, and this is a little bit off topic from what Taylor was talking about, but if you boil the water, you're killing the organism, but there are toxins that organism creates, especially when it dies, called microcystin. And so those can be very dangerous. So if there's a boil alert and there's blue-green algae in the water or something like that, and you boil the water, that is not necessarily good. That can be very unhealthy. The other thing that I'd say, going back to Taylor's point, is not only will the RO system not remove the biologicals, but what they don't tell you is now your RO system is contaminated. And so if you ever have a boil alert, then and you have an RO system or a filter, that biological, that bacteria is trapped in that RO system now, and they're living organisms. They grow and multiply, and you can get a worse situation than if you didn't have the filter in the first place, because that biological is trapped in that reverse osmosis system.
Wow. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's a little scary, actually.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's actually one of the biggest problems in the water treatment industry with reverse osmosis is they are susceptible to biological buildup because the biological contaminants, they grow through these filters. So eventually they're going to come over into your drinking water side.
I see. Right. They'll build up on the one side and then eventually make it over. Wow.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So people that, if you have a reverse osmosis or a filter and you take that membrane out and there's like a green or black slime on it, that's bacteria that's gotten trapped in there and grown in there and created a bacteria colony. And, that's not good.
That doesn't sound good. Makes me not want to drink water from anywhere. Okay, well, understood. That makes a lot of sense. Very valuable information, actually, in navigating how to drink clean water. And interesting, we do actually, I live in upstate New York here, and we've had some alerts on blue-green algae not to go swimming in certain spots around the lakes here, because we have the Finger Lakes here. So I'm familiar with that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So just to make sure I duplicate it, so when somebody, going back to the algae and the biological contamination, when somebody boils water, it doesn't necessarily, it kills the biological, whatever is going on there, the algae, etc. But it will leave some toxins behind that you'll still be consuming from basically the dead organism.
Yeah, so the EPA has, so if you have an emergency with your water supply, and that means basically biologicals that are in the water supply, they recommend 3 different methods. They recommend boiling, chlorination, or distillation. They don't recommend any filtration because of what we just talked about, where it doesn't kill it and actually gets trapped in there. Now, if we look at those 3 different methods there, so chlorine, what are you doing? You're just adding a chemical to it. You're not removing anything. So you can kill the bacteria, but the overall water that you're drinking is not necessarily the best to drink, right? Now, if you boil water, you're killing the bacteria. But if you think about it with distillation, so when we distill water, so we're boiling water and then taking the water vapor, and that's the pure part. Though the steam that comes off is pure, and all the stuff that we're removing is being left behind. And so that when you boil water, you're killing the bacteria, but you're actually concentrating everything else. So if you've got lead in the water, and it's never one dimensional, it's never one thing in the water. There's a whole range of things that are in the water, and so you are concentrating everything else in the water. So yes, you're killing the bacteria, but concentrating everything else. Whereas distillation, we're killing the bacteria, leaving it behind, and taking only the pure water vapor from that.
Okay, yeah, makes perfect sense. Okay, so this kind of leads into the next thing I wanted to go over, which is some of the myths that are around, filtration of water and distillation, and why distilled water is the most healthy thing, and why it's not something that depletes the body or doesn't give you what you need from your water, basically. Can you speak to that a bit?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think the first thing to touch on is discussing minerals first, because at first people say, well, distilled water leaches minerals from the body, but we have to first talk about what type of minerals are in our tap water supply first. So when we are looking at minerals, we are seeing minerals in our water that are inorganic. So that means they don't contain a carbon-based molecule. They are not bioavailable to the human body. So we get our minerals that come from an organic source, which would be foods that we eat, our fruits and vegetables. However, there are many practitioners or health coaches that recommend supplements that you can add back into your water that contain carbon-based molecules, because those are bioavailable to us. And I know a lot of that is due to, because we don't get a lot of minerals from our diets anymore. It's very difficult to get all of those minerals, but they're not bioavailable in our water. So what you might see around your fixtures or your bathtub is that like small film of it's like a white or gray discoloration. That is basically a rock deposit. So those are minerals that we shouldn't be consuming. There are many doctors, practitioners who have said things like that can lead to kidney stones, hardness of the joints, arthritis. So when you are drinking distilled water, it is just pure H2O. It is scientifically impossible for distilled water to go into your cells and pull out those minerals from your body. So you're not going to become mineral deficient by drinking distilled water. It's completely safe, long-term, short-term, to be consuming.
Perfect. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We've had that question a lot at the clinic, actually, and it's
Mhm.
you know, we always recommend whole food supplements or foods that have high minerals that a person needs, and it just makes total
Mhm.
sense. You wouldn't go lick the things around your faucets to get minerals. That is disgusting for
Exactly.
one thing, and it just doesn't work.
Mhm.
So yeah, that makes a lot of
Mhm.
sense. Distilled water is not going to draw anything out, and it will only help you. So okay, great.
I mean, the purpose of water. You can look at the purpose of water in your
Yeah,
body, and there are so many uses. I mean, water is the fundamental thing that we need for our body. But the one thing that it's really not for is minerals. I mean, we get our minerals from our plants and foods. That's where we get our minerals. There are a myriad of other uses that we have that our bodies need water for, but you know, everyone focuses on minerals. I don't understand why they do that, because that's not what water is for,
yeah,
you
I
know.
agree. I think it's another one of
Mhm.
those marketing ploys that have been artfully used to make people do certain things, shall we say.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Right. And there are still some people who will believe that, which is fine. If, they truly believe that they need minerals from their water, then start with distilled water, which again is just pure H2O. You've removed virtually all toxins from the water, and then add back into it what you want to. Now you are in control of your water, and you are starting with a clean
Right.
slate.
Yeah, makes
Yeah.
perfect sense. And there are a lot of things we do recommend to add to water: electrolytes, some products from
Yeah.
different lines that we hold. Like, well, Cellcore has a product called CT Minerals. We have people add that to their water.
Mm-hmm.
So there's plenty of things you
Yep.
can do to get what you want out of your water, but it makes a lot of sense. Start with water that you know is pure, so you're not adding good stuff to contaminated water, basically. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
perfect. Okay, great. So that makes a lot of sense. There were a couple other myths I wanted to make sure we cover.
What are your thoughts on alkaline water?
Um, we also have to think about, there's this huge misconception about pH. There's a lot of people talking about pH, that we need to have be consuming foods and water that have a higher pH. But we have to think about what we're eating on a regular basis. There are certain fruits and vegetables that have an acidic pH. A lot of people are drinking sodas and coffee and juices. Those have an acidic pH. So we are we're around that all the time, and we're consuming those things on a daily basis. And our body, that's what our kidneys are for. Our kidneys are the organs that are going to maintain the pH, and we don't want to be altering our pH by drinking water, again, that's contaminated, that is going to throw off our system. It when you are drinking distilled water, it is a neutral pH, which is around 7.0 on the pH scale. Now it can start to become acidic over time if you're leaving it out for a long period, because it's going to absorb some of the carbon dioxide, but it's still pure for you to drink. With alkaline water,
And it's very, very,
yes,
very
yes,
mildly
absolutely.
acidic
But
too.
with alkaline water, you're adding back in things like sodium, potassium, calcium, and magnesium into the water to increase the pH. Again, those are minerals and electrolytes that are in our water that we do not need. We don't need to be adding those back in. And in fact, there are many other doctors out there that can talk about how drinking alkaline water can really actually affect your digestive system. So it's something that you shouldn't be avoiding, even if you are dealing with gut health issues. And Ryan, I know you said you talk about that with some of your clients as well. Mhm.
Yeah, very much. So whenever anybody comes in with digestive situations, one of the first things, well, the first thing we started was with the mouth, but then right after that, you get into the stomach. And if the
Mhm.
pH of the stomach isn't, when they're digesting foods, especially proteins and fats, if it isn't down around 1 or 2, then you're starting out with a bad situation. So these alkaline waters really do damage the ability of a person
Mhm.
to digest things correctly. And also that low pH, the acidic pH, kills off things that we don't want going into the rest of our digestive tract and then into our body. So yeah, from our perspective, we don't recommend alkaline water either. But
if you look at like a Kangen system, so a Kangen system, those won't work on distilled water. You have to start with contaminated water for those things to work. So I think one of the number one thing that people should look for in whether they should trust what they're hearing about water, because there's a lot of water scams. I mean, you can talk about, there's so many water scams, and I think the main thing is purity is number one. Purity has to be number one. It has to be your number one priority. And if that's not the number one priority, then there should be a red flag that goes up. And then I could go off on some tangents about that, but I don't know how deep in the weeds we want to go with that. But one more thing about the alkaline water, I think the number one drug that's prescribed in America, or the number one drug that's used, is basically what's the word, where you've got acid coming up, acid reflux.
Acid reflux.
So acid reflux. So if you think about that, these people that say they get good results from alkaline water and that type of thing, they probably do. I mean, it's like taking a Tums, but but that doesn't mean that it's healthy for you. It doesn't mean that it's addressing the underlying problem, which is there's something causing that acid reflux, which is basically bad diet or something like that. You need to have pure water going into your body, and you don't want to add toxins into your body. That's really number one.
Makes sense. Yeah, I like that analogy about the Tums to alkaline water, because when people say that they take Tums, they come into the practice like, well, that handles my digestion for me. I want to work on something else. Like, wait. There's an underlying situation here we need to address. And I could see how that alkaline water could have a similar effect, because Tums just basically send your stomach into an alkaline state. They don't address the fact that your stomach's not acidic enough in the first place, and that's why your esophageal valve is opening and giving you acid reflux. So that makes a lot of sense, actually. So, okay, cool. Thank you for bringing that up. So the other thing I wanted to ask that's been a myth that's kind of come up for us is some people say, well, isn't distilled water dead water?
Yeah, that's a really interesting one, and I'm not sure where that originated from, but distilled water is H2O, so 2 hydrogen, 1 oxygen. It does not contain cells, it is not living, but water in general is not living, nor is it dead. So by you drinking distilled water, you're not going to be drinking dead water and having, other issues. Water is just water. So it kind of humors me a little bit when people say it's dead water, you should be drinking living water. Or there are some people who say that they have a system that makes their water alive. And I'm really curious to hear how it becomes dead and then changes to living. What are they adding into the water to make it alive? That's really interesting.
Yeah, that would definitely be an additive thing.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, this is what I was saying. There's a lot of scams, and people have really good stories that they create around this. And, they always have some kind of patented device that you can only get that type of water through their patented device and, get their magic water. And they have a great story, and they talk about living water and all that stuff. And water's not living. Water doesn't live. It's key for everything that is alive. It is the key element for it, but it is not alive. And but it's an emotional story that they tell, And it should be a red flag for people when they hear
I
that
agree.
kind of thing.
Well, and I know that a lot of our clients are very interested in water because we know that it influences everything. And I think it's such an important topic. We've had people we've worked on for years, and all of a sudden, it was just overlooked that they had switched water sources mid working with us, and that was a contaminant that we weren't aware of at the time. And then you get it tested, you fix it, and all of a sudden, all these different situations clear up. So I think water is a bit of an emotional subject because it can influence so many things in a person's life. And people can prey on that if they're of that nature.
Sure.
Yeah, it also goes to the whole fountain of youth mythology, because there is something in people. So I talk about all the scams that happen, right? But scams can't happen unless people want to be scammed, really. And they're looking for some magic bullet that's going to reverse, 30 years of bad habits that they've created. And that's not the way water works. Water's not a magic thing. There's no device that's going to make water some magic thing. But what you can do is you can prevent toxins that create, toxins that can contribute to cancer and other diseases and mental health and all of these things. You can prevent those from going into your body. You can prevent your body from having to deal with, everything that goes in your body has to deal with somehow. And if you prevent those from going into your body, that's less stress on your body. And so, that's the proper way to look at it.
And that's perfect. So I did want to talk about contaminants that we find in our well water and our, city water and whatnot, and what we're being exposed to if we don't have pure water.
Yeah, so before we kind of talked about glyphosate a little bit, which has been something that everyone is talking about now because it's been found in our water, it's been found in our foods. It's an active ingredient that is found in Roundup, which is a herbicide. And it's actually been shown that it's linked to cancer. There's a lot of lawsuits out there of glyphosate being linked to people who are getting cancer now. Ryan, I know you have talked about this before, but what I've learned even from Cellcore was they had talked about how it can affect the gut lining or the lining of your gut, and also can affect your joints and tendons. So this is found in our city water and also in our well water. So some people think that they're safer because they have a private well, but that's unfortunately not the case. So we're seeing it more and more in water now. And in fact, it became such like a huge problem and more in the news that back in 2019, we had our water distillers tested for it, and we were very successful with our results. So we do all of our testing through independent third-party laboratories, and that was a contaminant that we were really excited that we were able to remove that because it was such a big deal in the news.
Yeah, it's a big deal in our clinical practice just over the last few years. I don't know, the farm agricultural big ag industry went crazy on glyphosate or something changed.
Yeah.
Because we had more people coming in and showing up for that. And it then being, especially, which is really tragic, an issue for young people growing up, teenagers having more joint problems and unfortunately even having mental deficiencies because of all these contaminants. So knowing that it comes out when you actually use distillation is pretty incredible.
Yeah, and that's just one thing. I mean, if you look at there's so many different dimensions to this. So we remember the Flint, Michigan thing with the lead in the water, and then USA Today came out with a report that said that found that over 2,000 water sources across the U.S., I mean, like municipal water sources, had high levels of lead. And many of them had higher levels of lead than Flint, Michigan. Many had much higher levels of lead than Flint, Michigan. but none of them got the attention. I mean, the whole Flint, Michigan thing was a very political thing. That's why it got all this attention. But there was one place they tested a daycare in New York. I think it was Ithaca, New York. They tested a daycare.
That's where I live.
Is Ithaca near you?
Oh, wow.
Oh, okay. So they tested a daycare in Ithaca where it was. So I think Flint, Michigan, I think it was 10 times the legal limit of lead or something like that. I think it was 10 times. This daycare was 330 times the lead level. I mean, that is on the verge of being toxic waste there. I mean, that is really, really dangerous. I mean, it's beyond dangerous. It is. There's no way that a kid is not going to be permanently harmed from the lead in that water. And so anyway, my point is those are just one dimensions. But if you think about it, every single contaminant, chemical that is burned, sprayed, flushed, dumped, or anything like that ends up in the water supply because it all goes through this cycle. We were talking about the hydrologic cycle. And anything that's smoke that's in the air, it will be cleaned out by the rain, and it'll come down, and the rain will take it into rivers and streams and underground aquifers and all of that stuff. If it's dumped, flushed, sprayed on agriculture, any of that stuff, it's going to end up in the water supply. And so this is one of the hard parts about contamination is everywhere you go, the water contamination is different, and you're going to go different places than I go, and you're going to go, and we're going to go different places than Taylor goes, and we're all going to have different mixes of this stuff. So you can't isolate those problems that come from contamination, and so it's a very difficult thing to just isolate and narrow down. So anyway, that's an important point to understand.
Yeah, that's super important. That hits, it's more than close to home. That hits at home. So you have to send me a copy of that article. I want to find out which daycare it was. Start steering people away. But just curious, so lead found at that level obviously is completely toxic. Do you have any idea of source of that level of toxic lead in water supplies, where that might come from?
That was, my guess is that was pipes in the system, or something wasn't installed right, something wasn't done right. And, but that was an individual daycare, whereas most of the other places that they tested were the actual municipal water supplies. So, and there were over 2,000 across the U.S. that they tested, in every state across the U.S. that were high in lead.
Makes sense. And then, so there are a lot of different toxins that a person can be exposed to in water. What are some of the things that these lead to in health or, overall well-being of people?
Yeah, so the first thing you can actually look at, and I've done this myself, and anybody who's listening can do this as well, but you can go to the ewg.org, and you can look up on their tap water database, type in your zip code and where you get your water supply from, and it will actually show a list of contaminants that they have detected. So I do want everyone to know that it's not all of the contaminants that are in your water supply, because there's thousands and thousands now, but it's the ones that they have tested for. And if you see those contaminants that have been detected, almost every single one is going to say potential effect cancer, potential effect cancer. So there are so many toxins in our environment, whether it's in our air, our food, and our water, that are linked to cancer. Now, there, of course, are other things that it can lead to. Nitrates and nitrites, for an example, those can actually affect how blood carries oxygen to the body. So if you have an infant or a baby that is drinking high levels of water with nitrates or nitrites, it can actually lead to blue baby syndrome. So there are so many other issues such as thyroid issues, just a lot of different health effects or illnesses or diseases that this contamination has caused.
Yeah, no, we see that. I have a lot of reality on that occurring. And the interesting thing is that in many cases, once a person gets onto pure water and starts changing things, things can turn around pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And which I think is really exciting for people to realize that it's kind of intense to hear how many contaminants are in our water and surrounding us. It's a bit of a reality check, and it can be a bit of a downer, but when you know that there is a way of handling it and resolving it, it
Mm-hmm.
is also very empowering. And like you said earlier about having control over your water, and you can then do what you want with it, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah, so
Yeah, and I've actually heard of this happening, especially because people are now going through detoxing protocols. They are learning more that they're exposed to so many environmental toxins that there are some people, and I've talked to them over the phone, where they've said, "Hey, I just started distilled water. My bowels are now loose. I'm feeling a little tired. Is this because there's not minerals in my water now?" And again, we don't need minerals from our water. That's not necessarily the reason why you're going through those symptoms, but you've been around this environment for so long. You've been drinking toxic water for so long, and now you're changing to distilled water. Your body could be reacting to a way that it's not used to because now you're drinking clean distilled water. So now this isn't the case for everybody. Some people I've talked to on the phone, they don't notice changes right away. There are some people that actually really do notice positive changes and they already start to feel better. So it's really interesting to hear each case by case situation.
yeah, everybody is so different. They definitely react in different ways. I know for myself personally, when I started distilled water, it wasn't like an overnight thing, but eventually, I noticed more energy, and just the peace of mind of knowing that I was in control of what I was drinking was pretty amazing as well.
Right.
And we've noticed in the clinic that some people, it helps with detox because the body seems to let go of its defense mechanism of, well, you're feeding me all these toxins all the time, so I have to kind of keep things in a certain status quo and hold on to toxins so that they don't get released too fast and cause detox reactions. And so we have found that when you can use a good detox protocol along with distilled water, the results are exponential. You get a lot more out of what you're trying to do. So that's a factor as well.
Yeah. Totally makes sense.
Okay, great. So I'd like to go over a little bit about how exactly your distillation, products work and why they are so amazing. And, then let people understand if they were to get one of these, how would they use it? How does it operate in a day-to-day basis? Things like that.
Yeah, so with our distillers, if you go onto our website at mypurewater.com and go to the home water distillers section, you will see we have countertop distillers that are suitable for 1 to 2 people in the household. They do not require installation and they're very easy to operate. And then you also have the choice of looking at an automatic water distiller. Automatic means that it hooks up to a water line. They're going to produce more water. So for a family, that could be 2 or more in the household, and they're going to be a more convenient option for those who want to have more distilled water or just ready when they need it. You're not having to work for your water, so to speak. So with our pure water distillation systems, the really cool thing about these is not only are you distilling your water, but we do actually have 2 different technologies with the machine. So one is that we have dual vents of the distillers. So Distillation removes the broadest range of contaminants in our water supply, but there are things such as volatile organic compounds, also known as VOCs, that can vaporize over with the steam. So with these VOCs, they're actually removed by the dual vents of the machine. VOCs are lighter than air, so that means the steam is too heavy for it to escape through these vents, but these VOCs, or these dual vents, are strategically placed for these volatile organic compounds to escape. And then if any remain at the end of the distillation cycle, you also have an activated carbon filter. So kind of what Glenn talked about earlier, that also is going to help with the taste of the water as well. So with all of that combined, that's why we can claim our distillers produce over 99% pure water, because they've been tested through independent third-party laboratories.
Nice. Yeah, I saw a video on your website, and the before and after test was like 300 parts per million of solids in the water, and then afterwards it was actually 0 for that particular example.
Yeah.
Which I thought was pretty amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then there's the different models are basically based on your lifestyle, what you want to achieve out of it. I mean, so Taylor talked about the countertop one. The countertop one is for small apartments, let's say, if you can't install a water line into the unit. But anyone that has their own home probably would want one of the automatic units. So it's basically you run a water line into the unit, kind of like the ice maker hookup on a fridge. It's just a water line goes into it, and then it makes the distilled water. And then there's the best unit they have is the Mega Classic, the best unit we have. I'm not with the company, so I say they. I'm not with the company anymore. But the best product that is on the market today is the largest. It's called the Mega Classic water distiller, and it is a fantastic machine. And so you have the water line running in, but then it's got a built-in pump, and so you can pump that to a separate faucet on your sink, to your ice maker, or whatever you want to do. Plus, it's got an automatic drain in there, so every time it stops the distillation cycle, it drains it down the drain. And if you have a softener on the front of that, it will keep all the hardness and all of the stuff in solution, so it just drains down, and you will have very little maintenance on the machine. One thing that's, sometimes people object to is, oh, well, all this crud, I got to clean it out of the boiling tank. Well, first of all, that's stuff that didn't go into your body, and your body didn't have to deal with it. So you got to look at it in the right way, for one thing. But then if you have the one with the automatic drain and have a softener, really it just goes down the drain, and you don't have to even worry about it. It's a fantastic unit. And then really the only maintenance you have is this carbon filter that you change every 3 to 6 months on the Mega Classic. And so having a distillation / with carbon filter is the best purification system that you can have. And I will say also, let me just say, this is for drinking and consumable. So anything that goes into your body, so if you're going to cook, if you're going to make chili or soups, or anything that goes in your body, that's what this is for. This is not for showers or anything like that.
So quick question. You mentioned earlier that the carbon filters can become, corrupted with biologics. So if I'm thinking correctly on this, the distillation process would have handled any of those biologic material or organisms that could get lodged into that carbon filter in this system you're talking about.
Yes.
We're only running distilled water through that.
So that would never be an issue because it's never exposed to any biologic organisms of any sort.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. And then where does it fit? Like you attach it to a water line. Does it go under a sink, or do you just use one of your spaces in the kitchen for it? How does that work?
So with an automatic distiller, most people will have this installed in their basement, utility room, in your laundry room. You could have it there as well, or in your garage if it doesn't freeze in the winter. Those are usually common places because the distiller it's a little bit larger, so you might not want to have it installed in your kitchen. And because it is going to be going through that distillation process, you're going to constantly have a fan on. So it might be a little too noisy for the kitchen. So those 4 places are usually the most common.
Awesome. Okay, great.
And not under the sink or
Yes.
something, because it needs to have airflow. So it needs to be more of an open place. And if someone was down in Florida where it doesn't freeze, we've actually installed them outside. But they're not designed. So if you install them outside, you got to put like some kind of cover over them, like something that protects it from the rain, because it's not designed to be outside. But sometimes in Florida or places where it doesn't freeze, they don't have basements, so it's it's a challenge to find a location for that. So they just go right outside their kitchen and just
that makes sense. I lived in Florida for a little bit, so I can relate to that. The no basement thing was kind of hard to get used to.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah, I grew up here, so okay, great. This is great information. I've learned a lot today, actually. So good. I think we covered all the broad points I wanted to cover. Is there anything else that you thought we should bring up or go over that we haven't touched on?
One thing I just realized that we didn't touch on is obviously just a little more about the company, Pure and Secure, which makes the Pure Water and Aqua Nui brands. It's a small family-owned business in Nebraska. So it is a USA made company. A lot of people are, really trying to support local and realizing that buying in the US is much better than from across seas. So you're getting a very good quality distiller. We've been in business for over 50 years. And the great thing about our systems too, and I know this just because I've worked with many customers through the few years that I've been here, is I will talk to someone over the phone and eventually they're ready to upgrade to a different system. And they will tell me that they've had their distiller for 20 or 30 years. So I get those stories all the time. And that just goes to show that the machine is built to last. It's not something where, it lasts you a couple years and then you've got to buy a whole new one. So it's a good quality distiller. It's made with US stainless steel, so it's very durable and produces high purity water as well.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, after listening to and going over everything we have today, I'm pretty sure everyone should have one of these in their house.
Yes.
Just period. It would probably lower your lifetime health and medical bills exponentially above the cost of the distiller itself.
Absolutely. Yes, it pays itself off in the end. It might be expensive right up front, but you do also have to keep in mind you're not buying bottled water or replacing these expensive filters that you have to do periodically with an RO system. So it is going to pay itself off.
Okay, great. And then once somebody purchases, it's shipped out, I assume, and it arrives at their home?
Yes, we can ship it directly to their home. There is a little bit of a lead time though, so it'll be approximately 4 to 6 weeks before we can have the product shipped out. So you'll get your order in. I do want to let everyone know that we are shipping out regularly, so you are going to get your machine. There's just a little bit of a lead time.
Right. And then when somebody, say they receive the tabletop or the unit you use in your kitchen, that sounds like it's pretty, just plug it in, add water, you're ready to go. On the other systems, you would need to maybe have somebody hook up a water line that's dedicated to the filtration system. Is that correct?
Yes, so you will want to have a licensed plumber install the water distiller. As long as they're following the manual, which includes the installation instructions step by step, they should have no problem at all. It's a very simple water line hookup. And then if they have to add a pump and then a distilled water line, again, just follow the instructions. They should be very familiar, especially with a demand pump and then also running a separate line.
Okay, great.
Thank you for sticking with us today, and hopefully this information was very valuable to you and understand now how to use water to improve your health more efficiently. Your next step is to get your own pure water distillation system. You can go directly to their website, mypurewater.com, to purchase a distillation system for your countertop or your entire house. You can also go into the show notes and you will find a link there you can use with our discount code NWC to get a 5% discount on any water distiller you would like to check out. Again, if you'd like more information, please feel free to reach out. You can reach out to My Pure Water directly, info@mypurewater.com or 1-800-875-5915. Thank you very much. Have a great day.